Hi everybody, what's up? It's another Monday. You know what that means? It's another Murderous Mondays with your host, Murderous Mondays, Michael. And today we're going to be talking about. Wait, hold on. Before I get into it, I'm sorry I didn't upload last week. Um, I thought my friend was leaving at 2:30, but she actually stayed until 3 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock I had to go to work. So, that was last Monday though. But this Monday I don't have to be at work until 6. So, I can do the video today. So, um, yeah, so that's why I didn't do the video last week. But I'm doing it now. So, hey guys, what's up? On this channel, Murderous Mondays, I talk about serial killers and I upload every Monday. Well, except for last week, but obviously, every week going forward, except last week. I'm gonna try to do it every Monday. Hence the name of hence the name of the channel. And the next serial killer that I will be talking about, um, remember that I gave a hint that he wrote the note to um to one of his victims' parents. This is going to be an older case, like almost 100-year-old case, black and white. Albert Fish. Who was he? What was his early life like, and why and how did he become so evil? I will answer that and more in this video as I take you down the perspective mind of a serial killer. Now, I can normally handle serial killers and the gory details that they've committed, but this guy is something else, pure evil. If you guys do not want to hear about cannibalism, blood drinking, rape, torture, God telling them what to do, and so many other cruel things that this man did, I'd say do not watch this video and take care of yourselves. The word cruel doesn't even begin to justify his actions. Albert Fish looked like an innocent grandfather, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Albert Fish wasn't even his real name. It was Hamilton Howard. And he was born on May 19th, 1870 to January 16th, 1936. And he was an American serial killer, rapist, child molester, and cannibal who committed at least three child murders from July 1924 to June of 1928. He was known He was also known as the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Brooklyn Vampire, which he actually did most of his killings in Brooklyn, I think. Either that or Washington, D.C. The Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman. Fish was a suspect in at least 10 murders during his lifetime, although he only confessed to 3 murders that police were able to trace to a known homicide. He also confessed to stabbing at least 2 other people. Fish con- Fish once boasted that he had children in every state, which that's just ugh. And at one time he stated that his number of victims was about 100. However, it is not known whether he was referring to rapes or cannibalization, nor is it known if this statement was truthful. Fish was apprehended on December 13th, 1934, and was put on trial for the kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd, which after the murder, that's the one that he would write, detailing what he did to um her daughter to the mother. He was convicted and executed by electric chair on January 16th. On January 16th, yeah, 1936, at the age of 65. Good for you. Early life. Albert Fish was born Hamilton Howard Fish in Washington, D.C. on May 19th, 1870. To Randall Fish, who was born 1795 to 1875, and Elaine Frances Howell from 1838 to 1903, which I couldn't find the exact dates of their births and deaths, but yeah. Although, well, alright, Fish's father was an American of English ancestry, and his mother was a Scots-Irish American. Fish's father was 43 years older than his mother at age 75 at the time of his birth. Wow. Talk about a male cougar. Fish was the youngest and child and had three living siblings, Walter, Annie, and Edwin, which and and at this time he wished to be called Albert after a dead sibling and to escape the nickname Ham and Eggs that was given at an orphanage in which he spent much of his childhood. Fish's family had a history of mental illness. His uncle had mania, and one of his brothers was confined in a state mental hospital. A paternal half-brother suffered from schizophrenia, and his sister Annie was diagnosed with a mental affliction. Three other relatives were diagnosed with mental illnesses, and his mother had auroral and or visual hallucinations. Fish's father was a fertilizer manufacturer and former riverboat captain. He suffered a fatal heart attack at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station on October 16th, 1875. Alright, so we know that October 16th, 1875, he died. His father. Fish's mother put her son into St. John's Orphanage in Washington, where he was frequently physically abused. Fish began to enjoy the physical pain that the beatings brought, and by 1880, Fish's mother secured a government job and was able to remove Fish from the orphanage in 1882 at the age of 12. He began at in 1882 at the age of 12 he began a relationship with a telegraph boy. The youth introduced Fish to such practices as drinking urine and eating feces. Fish began visiting public baths where he would watch other boys undress, spending a great portion of his weekends on these visits. So he was also gay too. Yes, he was also gay along as a murderer, as well as yeah. Throughout his life, he would write obscene letters to women whose names he acquired from classified advertising and matrimonial agencies. 1890 to 1918, early adulthood and criminal history. By 1890, at age 20, Fish moved to New York City. There, he engaged in male prostitution and began molesting and raping boys, mostly less than 6 years old. Six! In 1898, Fish's mother arranged a marriage for him with Mary Hoffman, who was 9 years his junior. They had 6 children: Albert, Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry Fish. In 1903, Fish was arrested for grand larceny, convicted, and incarcerated in Sing Sing. That's some kind of prison, I think, in upstate New York or something. Fish later recounted an incident in which a male lover took him to a wax museum where he was fascinated by a bisection of a human penis and subsequently became obsessed with sexual mutilation. X-ray of Fish's pelvis and perineum introduced as evidence at his trial, demonstrating more than 24 self-embedded needles in his wee-wee. Several years later, around 1910, Fish was working in Wilmington, Delaware, when he met a 19-year-old man named Thomas Bedin. He took Bedin to where he was staying, and they two began a sadomas sad sadomasochistic relationship. It was unclear whether or not Fish forced Bedin to engage in sadomasochistic activities, but his confession implied that Bedin was intellectually disabled. After 10 days, Fish took Bedin to an old farmhouse, where he tortured him over a period of 2 weeks. Fish eventually tied Bedin up and cut off half of his penis. He said, "I shall never forget his scream or the look he gave me." He originally intended to kill Bedin, cut up his body, and take it home, but he feared that the hot weather would draw attention to him because of the stench. Instead, Fish poured peroxide over the wound, wrapped it in a Vaseline-covered handkerchief, and left a $10 bill, and kissed Benning goodbye and left. Because remember, he's kind of like a male stripper kind of sort of, so he a $10 bill, which back in the day was probably like a couple $100. Probably like $100 back in the day. I don't know. Uh, he took. He said that he took the first train he could get back home. He what never heard what become of him, or tried to find out. Fish said. In January 1917, Fish's wife left him for John Straub, a handyman who boarded with the Fish family. Fish then had to raise his 6 children as a single parent, which obviously he became into a life of crime, so he couldn't have. And after his arrest, Fish told a newspaper that when his wife left him, she took nearly every possession the family owned. Fish began to have auditory hallucinations. He once wrapped himself in a carpet, saying that he was following the instructions of John the Apostle. It was about the time that Fish began to indulge in self-harm by embedding needles into his groin and abdomen. After his arrest, X-rays revealed that Fish had at least 29 needles lodged in his pelvic region. He also hit himself repeatedly with a nail-studded paddle and inserted wool doused with lighter fluid into his anus and set it alight. So he was a weird guy, as opposed to a serial killer. While Fish was never thought to have physically attacked or abused his children, he did encourage them and their friends to paddle his buttocks with the same nail-studded paddle he used to abuse himself. So he would literally moon. I guess that's where the moon maniac comes from, because he would literally moon them, and they would when they would smack him on the ass. 1919 to 1930 escalation. Around 1990, Fish stabbed an intellectually disabled boy in Georgetown. He chose people who were either mentally disabled or African Americans. What's the difference? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, but back at the time, back at the time, racist and segregation were still a thing. And he attacked his victims, later explaining that he assumed these people would not be missed when killed. Fish would later claim to have occasionally paid boys to procure other children for him, like lure children into like his sex dungeon. Fish tortured, mutilated, and then murdered young children with his implements of hell, so to speak. A meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a small handsaw. On July 11th, 1924, Fish found 8-year-old Beatrice Keel playing alone on her parents' farm in Staten Island, New York. He offended. He offered her money to come help him look for rhubarb. Rhubarb? I don't really know what that is. She was about to leave the farm when her mother chased Fish away. Fish left but returned later to Keel's barn, where he tried to sleep but was discovered by Beatrice's father and forced to leave. During 1924, the 54-year-old Fish, suffering from psychosis, felt that God was commanding him to torture and sexually mutilate children. Shortly before his abduction of Grace Budd, Fish attempted to his implements of hell, which, like the weapons of mass destruction, on a 10-year-old child he had been molesting named Cyril Quinn. Quinn and his friend were playing boxball, which is probably like handball or something, on the sidewalk. So maybe like doot ball or something. When Fish asked them if they had eaten lunch, when they said that they had not, he invited them into his apartment for sandwiches, but were never seen from again. Actually, true, probably too. While the two boys were wrestling on Fish's bed, they dislodged his mattress underneath with a knife and small handsaw and a meat cleaver. They became frightened and ran out of the apartment. Despite being already married, Fish married another woman named Estella Wilcox on February 6, 1930, in Waterloo, New York. They divorced literally only 1 week after they got married. Fish was arrested in May 1930 for, quote, sending an obscene letter to a woman who answered an advertisement for a maid, end quote. Following that arrest and another in 1931, he was sentenced to the Bellevue Hospital for observation. Murder of Grace Budd. On May 25th, 1928, Fish saw a classified advertisement in the Sunday edition of the New York World newspaper that read, quote, "A young man, 18, wishes position in country. Edward Budd, 406 West 15th Street." End quote. On May 28th, Fish and 58-year-old. Oh wait. On May 28th, Fish, then 58-year-old. He was 58 at the time. Visited the Budd family in Manhattan under the pretense of hiring by Edward. He later confessed that he planned to tie Edward up, mutilate him, and leave him to bleed to death. Fish introduced himself as Frank Howard, so one accomplice of his name. A farmer from Farmingdale, New York, which is not too far away. It's only about 20 minutes away from where I live. He promised to hire Bud and his friend and said he would send for them in a few days. Fish failed to show up, but he sent a telegram to the Bud's family apologizing and sent a later date. When Fish returned, he met Edward's younger sister, 10-year-old Gracie Budd. He apparently shifted his intentions towards Grace and quickly made up a story about having to attend his niece's birthday party. He persuaded the parents, Delia Bridget Flanagan and Albert Francis Budd Sr., to let Grace accompany him to the party that evening, which would be the biggest mistake that their parents have ever made. Fish subsequently took Grace to an abandoned house he had previously picked out to use for the murder of his next victim, Wisteria Cottage at 359 Mountain Road, located in East Irvington, New York. That's where the cottage was. That's where the house was. There, Fish manually strangled her to death and then decapitated and dismembered her body and ate most of the remains over the next several days. The police arrested then 66-year-old. Oh, wait. The police arrested 66-year-old Superintendent Charles Edward Pope on September 5th, 1930, as a suspect in Grace's disappearance, accused by Pope's estranged wife, even though we all know it was Albert Fish. Pope spent 108 days in jail between his arrest and trial on December 22nd, 1930. He was found not guilty. A letter to the mother of Grace Budd, so Delia Bridget Flanagan, so Albert Fish wrote a letter to her in November 1934. So June, July, August, September, October, November. 6 months after he brutally murdered her daughter. An anonymous letter sent to Grace's parents ultimately led the police to Fish. Bud's mother was illiterate and could not read the letter herself, so she had her son read it to her. And the unaltered letter reads, "My dear Miss Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped a now he's talking about in this story, right? He's talking about his dealings when he was in China, which we didn't even get there yet. It says, my dear Miss Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and two others were sent ashore and got drunk. And this right now about China, right? This is how he became uh a cannibalism a cannibalized person and a cannibal and dismembered people too, I think. When they returned, the boat was gone. At the time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 wow, were sold to the butchers to be cut up and sold for food in order to keep them from starving. I wonder if they were actually cooked alive. So that's actually how he became accountable because he saw it when he was, yeah, because he saw it firsthand when he was in China. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind. Now he said a boy or girl's butt was the sweetest part of the body and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. Uh, John stayed, right? So Captain John, right? John Davis, right? Alright, John Davis, right? John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole two boys, one 7 and one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, and tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night he spanked them, tortured them to make their meat good and tender. First he killed this 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass. I know it's not really supposed to be funny, but kinda is. And of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass. Boiled, broiled, fried and stewed. The little boy was next. The 7-year-old boy was next, and it went the same way. At the time, at the time Albert Fish was living at 409 100th Street, rear right side. He told me so often how good human flesh was. Now I remember John Davis, right? He said, this is Albert Fish talking still to Grace's mom about the murder. John Davis told Albert Fish so often how good human flesh was that he made up his mind to taste it. And on Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called you guys. I called the Buds residence at 406 W 15th Street. Brought you pot, cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her on the pretense of taking her to a party. Now his niece's birthday party. Remember that he was remember that the parents thought that he was taking her to his niece's birthday party, but it wasn't. You said yes, you could go, so I took her to an empty house in Westchester. I actually have family in Westchester, actually. I had already picked out. When I got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not want to get her blood on them, that that he would be naked. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama, but she would never be seen again. First, I stripped her naked. How she However, she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my room, cook, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It sounds so sadistic. Me reading it out loud. It took me 9 days because literally it sounds like I'm talking about me eating a girl's ass. But no, it's actually about Albert Fish saying it to Grace's mom. Now remember, this was still the letter that Grace's mom, detailing everything that he done to her daughter. He said, "It took me 9 days to eat her entire body." I'm not gonna say this word, but he said, "I did not fuck her though. I could have had, I wished. She died a virgin." Police investigated the letter, and although the story concerning Captain Davis and the famine in Hong Kong could not be verified, the part of the letter concerning the murder of Grace, however, was found to be accurate in its description of the kidnapping and subsequent events, although it was impossible to confirm whether or not Fish had actually eaten parts of Grace's body. So if you guys didn't really catch on about the letter, basically was detailing like what he did to Grace. Alright. Alright. Now, additional crimes discovered after Fish's arrest. One of them being Francis McDonald. During the night of July 14th, 1924, 9-year-old Francis McDonald was reported missing after he failed to return home after playing catch with his friends in Point Richmond, Staten Island. A search was organized and his body was found hanging by a tree in a wooded area near his home. He had been sexually assaulted and then strangled with his suspenders, according to an autopsy. McDonald had also suffered extensive lacerations to his legs and abdomen, and his left hamstring had almost entirely been stripped of its flesh. Fish refused to claim responsibility for this, although he later stated that he intended to castrate the boy but fled when he heard someone approaching the area. McDonald's friends told the police that he was taken by an elderly man with a gray mustache, aka Albert Fish, who was in his 60s by now. Wait, 1924. Yeah, late 50s. A neighbor also told the police he observed the boy with a similar looking man walking along a grassy path into the nearby woods. Francis's mother, Anna McDonald, said that she saw the same man earlier that day, telling reporters, quote, "He came shuffling down the street, mumbling to himself and making queer motions with his hands. I saw his thick gray hair," meaning mustache, and, wait, hold on, and his very drooping gray mustache. Everything about him seemed faded and gray. End quote. This description resulted in the mysterious stranger becoming known as the Gray Man. The McDonald murder remained unsolved until the murder of Grace Budd, when several eyewitnesses, among them the Staten Island farmer Hans Keel. So remember, God, well, yeah, yeah. So remember, Keel was the farmer or whatever. Yeah. So the farmer wait. When several eyewitnesses, I'm just going to read the sentence again. When several eyewitnesses, among them the Staten Island farmer Hans Keel, so German probably, Hans Gruber Schmidt, positively identified Fish as the odd stranger seen around Port Richmond on the day of McDonald's disappearance. Richmond County District Attorney Thomas Walsh announced his intention to seek an indictment against Fish for the boy's murder. At first, at first, Fish, that's first and fish at the same time, first. At first, Fish denied the charges. It was only in March 1935, after the conclusion of his trial for trial for the Budd murder, that and his confession of the killing of another boy, of another young child, Bill Gaffney, that he could. It was only then, after the Budd murder, that he confessed to the killing of Billy Gaffney, and that he confirmed to investigators that he also raped and murdered McDonald. When the McDonald confession was made public, the the New York Daily Mirror, which I guess is another newspaper, wrote that the disclosure solidified Fish's reputation as the most vicious child slayer in criminal history. Now we go to what he did to Bill Gaffney, which is just as bad as Grace Budd, only that he did not write to his parents. On February 11th, 1927, so literally a year before, no, hold on, where does it say? Yeah, so literally over a year before the murder of Grace, he murdered another person. He murdered another young child, this time a boy, on February 11th, 1927. 3-year old, 3. He could probably only barely walk and talk. But his 3-year-old Billy was, I guess his name was Billy Beaton, which is kind of ironic as a last name, after what he actually did beat him and kill him. Like Beaton, even though it's Billy Gaffney, it's also Billy Beaton. Well, Billy Beaton and his 12-year-old brother were playing in the apartment hallway in Brooklyn with 4-year-old William. Billy get. Oh, okay. Okay, so Billy Beaton was playing with a 4-year-old named Billy Gaffney. Billy Gaffney was the one that died. When the 12-year-old left for his apartment, both younger boys disappeared. Beaton was found later on the roof of the apartment, When he asked what happened to Gaffney, Beaton said, remember, he's only 3 years old. Beaton said, the boogeyman took him. Gaffney's body was never recovered. Initially, serial killer Peter Kudzanowski was a suspect in Gaffney's murder. Then Joseph Meehan, a motorman on a Brooklyn trolley, saw a picture of Fish in a newspaper and identified him as the old man whom he saw February 11th, 1927. So the day that he killed, Gaffney. The man had been trying to quiet a little boy sitting with him on the trolley. The boy was not wearing a jacket and was crying for his mother and was dragged by the man on and off the trolley. Beaton's description of the boogeyman matched Fish. Police matched the description of the child to Gaffney. Detectives of the Manhattan Missing Persons Bureau were able to establish that Fish was employed as a house painter by a Brooklyn real estate company during February 1927, and that on the day of Gaffney's disappearance, he was working at a at a location a few miles from where the boy was abducted. Gaffney's mother, Elizabeth Gaffney, visited Fish in Sing Sing, which was the prison, I think, in New York. She was not alone, though. She was accompanied by a Detective King, which I don't think it says his first name. She wanted to ask him about her son's death, but Fish refused to speak to her. At this time, I think she knew that he killed her son. However, Fish claimed the following in a letter to his attorney, quote, I brought him to the Riker Avenue dumps. There is a house that stands alone, not far from where I took him. I took the G boy there, Gaffney boy there, I'm assuming. Stripped him naked and tied his hands and feet and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out from the dump. Wow, so that's not hygiene either. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked back and took trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked home from there. Next day, about 2 p.m., so 12 hours later, I took tools. A good, heavy cat of nine tails, which I don't know what that means, home, made short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit these half in 6 strips, about 8 inches long, whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. Now, he was only, well, he was still young. He was only 4 years old when he died. He said, I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear, and gouged out his eyes. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. See, so that's where the cannibalism comes from. See, so that's where the blood drink comes from. I picked up 4 old potato sacks and gathered a pile of stones, and then I cut him up. I had a sack with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in the sack. Then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below the belly button. Then through his legs, about 2 inches below his behind. This is probably worse than what he did to Grace Budd. And this is a 4-year-old kid. I put this in my I put this in my grip with a lot of paper. I cut off the head, feet, arms, hands, and the legs below the knee. Then I put in sacks, weighed the stones, tied the ends, and threw them into the pools of slimy water you will see all along the road going to North Beach. Then I came home. I came home with my meat. I had in I had the front of his body I liked the best. His monkey and peewees, which I'm guessing are his pee and his balls, and a nice little fat behind to roast the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, and pieces of his face and belly. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper in it, and it was good. Then I split his cheeks, probably his butt cheeks, of his behind, open, cut off his penis and his balls, and washed them first. I put strips of bacon in each cheek of his behind and put them in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when meat had roasted, and the meat was roasted for about 15 minutes, I poured about a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown cooked through. I never ate any roast turkey that tasted half as good as his sweet, fat little behind did. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days. His little penis was as sweet as a nut, but his balls I could not chew, and I threw them in the toilet. End quote. Oh yeah, he's a sadistic person. Is this the last paragraph? Oh, no. Okay, here we go. Now we go trial and execution. Fish's trial for the murder of Grace Budd began on March 11th, 1935, in White Plains, New York. Frederick P. Close presided as judge in Westchester County. Chief Assistant District Attorney Albert, not Albert, Albert, with an E. Albert F. Gallagher was prosecuting attorney. Fish's defense counsel was James Dempsey, a former prosecutor at the one-time mayor of Peekskill, New York. The trial lasted for 10 days. Wow, it should only be lasted for a minute. Death, done. Next, tomorrow. Fish pleaded insanity. I forgot, there's an insanity part to this story. And claimed to have heard voices from God telling him to kill children. See, so this was in the starting point of where I said rape, torture, right? Blood-drinking cannibalism, right? It was also about God telling him what to do. Several psychiatrists testified about Fish's sexual fetishes, which included this. This is a mouthful and a half. Here we go. Sadism and masochism, masochism, flagellation, exhibitionism, voyeurism, piquerism, which probably means killing of gays, because queer is the root word. Cannibalism, coprophagia, which remember, the telegraph boy told him to eat the feces and drink the urine, which coprophagia is what rabbits do. They actually eat the feces. Urophilia, which probably drinks the urine, probably. Hematolagnia, pedophilia, which obviously, necrophilia, and infibulation. Dempsey, in his summation, Dempsey in his summation noted, I guess Dempsey and his jury and his friends, buddies, whatever, noted that fish was a psychiatric phenomenon, and that nowhere in legal or medical records was there another individual who possessed so many sexual abnormalities. The defense's chief expert witness was Frederick Wortham, a psychiatrist with an emphasis on trial development who conducted psychiatric examination for the New York criminal courts. During 2 days of testimony, Wortham explained Fish's obsession with religion and specifically his preoccupation with the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac. Genesis 22. I don't know what that says, but it's two. 22 1 dash 24 end parentheses. Wortham said that Fish believed that similarly sacrificing, quote, end quote, a boy would be penance for his own sins, and that even if the act itself was wrong, angels would prevent it if God did not approve. Fish attempted the sacrifice once before, but was thwarted. Thwarted. I don't really know what that stands. I don't really know what that means, but I guess he tried to, but didn't succeed. Fish attempted the sacrifice, probably like ending himself, probably once before, but was stopped, probably. That's what probably thwarted means. When a car drove past. Edward Budd, which I think was the older brother of Grace Budd, was the next intended victim, but he turned out to be larger than expected, so he settled on Grace. Although he knew Grace was female, it is believed that Fish perceived her as a boy, because remember, he was Picquarism. He liked boys, just like Jeffrey Dahmer. And African Americans, just like Jeffrey Dahmer. It's giving Dahmer vibes. Well, only for that much. Well, and the cannibalism too, and blood drinking. Wortham then detailed Fish's cannibalism, which, in his mind, he associated with communion. The last question Dempsey asked Wortham was 15,000 words long, detailed Fish's life, and ended with asking how the doctor considered his mental condition based on his life. Wortham simply answered, quote, that he's insane, end quote. Gallagher cross-examined Wortham on whether Fish knew the difference between right and wrong. He responded that he did know, but that he was a perverted that he did know, but was a perverted. Where is it? Wait, he responded that he did know, but that he was a perverted. Wait, but that it was a perverted knowledge based on his opinions of sin, atonement, and religion, and thus was an insane knowledge. The defense called two more psychiatrists to the stand to support Wortham's findings. The first of four rebuttal witnesses was Menas Gregory, the former manager of Bellevue Hospital, where Fish was treated during 1930. Um, Gregory testified that Fish was abnormal but sane. Under under cross-examination, Dempsey asked if coprophilia and neurophilia and pedophilia indicated a sane or insane person. Gregory replied that such a person was not, quote, mentally sick, not, quote, not mentally sick, end quote, and that these were common perversions, which probably like perversions that were socially perfectly all right, end quote, end quote, and that Fish was, and quote, no different from millions of other people, some very prominent and successful who had the same perversions, end quote. The next witness was the resident physician at the tombs, Perry like Lichtenstein. Liechtenstein. Dempsey objected to a doctor with no training in psychiatry testifying on the issue of sanity, but Close, Justice Close overruled on the basis that the jury could decide what weight to give a prison doctor. When asked whether Fish's causing himself pain indicated a mental condition, Lichtenstein replied, quote, that is not masochism, and he was only punishing himself to get sexual gratification, end quote. The next witness was Charles Lambert. He said that he testified that coprophilia was a common practice. Really, eating doo-doo is a common practice? And that religious cannibalism may be psychopathic, but was a waste of time and not evidence of psychosis. The last witness, James Vavasor, repeated Lambert's opinion. Another defense witness was Mary Nicholas, Fish's 17-year-old stepdaughter. Wow. I wonder if she knew what was going on while what was happening. She described how Fish taught her and her brothers and sisters several games involving overtones of masochism and child molestation. None of the jurors doubted that Fish was insane, but ultimately, as one day later explained that they felt he should be executed anyway. Duh. They found him to be sane and guilty, and the judge sentenced the defendant to death by electrocution. Fish arrived at prison on March 1935 and was executed on January 16, 1936, so less than a year later, in the electric chair in Sing Sing prison in New York. He entered the chamber at 11:06 p.m. and was pronounced dead 3 minutes later. He was buried in the Sing Sing prison cemetery. I did not even know that the prisons even had a cemetery. Fish is said to have helped the executioner position the electrodes on his body. And his last words, right? You would think that this person would have remorse. right? You would think that this person would know why he would be in there and know that he's a serial killer beyond belief and sadistic and everything up above. But no, his last words were were reportedly, "I don't even know why I'm here." According to one witness present, it took 2 jolts before Fish died. Fish got fried, no pun intended, creating the rumor that the apparatus was short-circuited by the needles that Fish inserted into his body years before. These rumors were later regarded as untrue, and Fish reportedly died in the same fashion and time frame as others in the electric chair. At a meeting with reporters after the execution, Fish's lawyer, James Dempsey, revealed that he was in possession of his client's final statement. This amounted to several pages of handwritten notes that Fish apparently penned in the hours just prior to his death. When pressed by the assembled journalists to reveal the document's contents, Dempsey refused, stating, "I will never show it to anyone. It was the most filthy string of obscenities that I've ever read." Now, now we have victims known, victims suspected, and victims possible that he also killed. Victims known: between 1924 and 1928, Fish is believed to have killed at least 3 children. Francis McDonnell, 8 years old, July 15th, 1924, Long Island, New York. And Bill Gaffney, only 4 years old, February 11th, 1927, New York City. And Grace Budd, age 10, June 3rd, 1928, in New York City. Victims suspected: Fish denied involvement with any other murders, even though it was rumored that he said that he had at least a couple in at least every state, which was actually 48 states at the time, because remember, Hawaii and Alaska were states at the time. Fish denied involvement with any other murders. However, he was a suspect in at least a dozen other murders. Detective. Okay, yeah, so we did learn his first name, William King. William King believed Fish may have been the Brooklyn Vampire, a rapist and murderer who mainly preyed on children and teenagers in and around the New York area. Yetta Abramowitz, age 12, was strangled and beaten on the roof of a 5-story apartment house at 1013 Simpson Street in the Bronx on May 14th, 1927. She died in a hospital shortly after she was found. An unidentified man matching Fish's physical description was cited trying to lure several local young girls into dark hallways and alleys on the date of Abramowitz's death. The mutilated body of 16-year-old Mary Ellen O'Connor was also found dead in the woods close to a house that Fish had been painting in Far Rockaway, Queens, on February 15th, 1932. Now, victims possible. Fish claimed to have sexually assaulted at least 100 boys, the most whom were African American, just like Jeffrey Dahmer, and was also gay, and also was a cannibal and blood drinker, who had developmental disabilities. Now, I don't know if he killed them because of disabilities, Dahmer, but I know Albert Fish did. He claimed that he picked them because he believed the police would not fully investigate attacks against them. Additionally, he asserted that he had that he had murdered a child in each of 23 states in which he had lived. These are the 5 people that victims possible. Thomas Bedden, right? So the Bedden person, age 19, in 1910. I don't know what circa means. Emma Richardson, age 5, October 3rd, 1926. Emil Ailing, Alling, age 4, so another age 4, July 13th, 1930. Robin Jane Liu, whatever, age 6, May 2nd, 1931. And Benjamin Collins, age 17, December 5th, 1932. So, wow, that was a handful in itself. I'm sorry if you guys don't understand a lot of that. I didn't really either. This was one of the most sadistic people that I've actually ever have come across, serial killer wise. And I will see you guys in the next video, which will be next Monday. I'll give you a hint on what my next video would be. I'll give you a hint. He's a Canadian. He's from Canada. I think he's still in prison. He's still alive because it's lenient, 25 to life. Um, I give you what he was known for. He was known as a pig farm killer. They always say that Canada always has nice people. Well, not for this guy. He killed 49 victims who were all sex workers. He was about to kill a 50th to make it an even 50, but he got sloppy, and he did not wind up killing the 55th, and not wind up killing the 50th, and instead got sentenced to jail, 25 to life, um, um, and when he was in jail, right, he was talking to an undercover cop who posed as one of his cellmates, and mm, I almost said it. I almost said his last name, and the serial killer, um, and the serial killer, um, what's the word? He admitted. Yeah, that's the word. He admitted to killing 49 people, but got sloppy on the 50th. And this happened actually in the late 90s, and he only got 25 to life, which I think he's in jail, but I mean, he actually had parole, but I think he's actually still in jail for life, though. He should be. He killed almost 50 people. I get they're all sex workers, but still, it's still a life. All right, catch you guys on my next video, and that'll be the next video that I'm gonna be doing, and I'll catch you guys on my next video, next Monday. Murderous Mondays, Michael, out. Peace.